Is this another conflict that Israel is going to get involved with heading into 2025? Has Israel got, I suppose, the people, the wherewithal, the energy to get involved with another conflict?
Well, that's a very good question. So, the first bit of your question, is this something that we're going to see more of in 2025? Yes, absolutely. I think it is. I think things are really spiralling in terms of Yemen's involvement in the broader Middle East conflict. But you're right to be cautious here, because this is quite a different type of beast for Israel to take on. There are some very significant differences between tackling Hamas and Hezbollah and tackling the Houthis. Probably the number one amongst those would be distance. Yemen's about just over 2,000 kilometers away from Israel. So it's not in a neighborhood like Hezbollah and Hamas were. And add to that the topography. The Houthis' strongholds are in the mountainous highlands of Yemen. They're really hard to get at if the leadership are hiding away. And the size, just that area of Yemen that the Houthis themselves control, is about 20 times the size of Lebanon, 500 times the size of Gaza, and the population's enormous too. The Houthis control an area in which about 20 million people live. So this is going to be a massive challenge for Israel.
Do we know how the people of Israel see this? Because, in any prolonged war, as we're seeing in the Middle East at the moment, your general population is going to get, or is going to reach a point of fatigue. Is this going to help a Benjamin Netanyahu-led government, which it kind of looked like it was going to earlier on this year, or is it that fatigue we're talking about?
It's a good question. It's hard to know exactly what the data is on Israel, because the population is so split. On the one hand, we have those who feel that they should just carry on now. They're on a roll. Netanyahu is riding high because he has managed to pull off some fairly dramatic attacks against, in particular, Hezbollah, with the pager attacks, the walkie-talkie attacks. That has definitely boosted his reputation. So there are those who think, yeah, let's go all out for it. Let's just take out all of the levers of Iran. But, of course, there'll be those who are living with this every day, being sent to the bomb shelters with your children in the middle of the night. That is absolute war fatigue for many people who just think, why can't we just make peace and figure out a way to live in the neighborhood? But it's very easy to imagine these different scenarios, and it's quite different to try and pull them off.
The Director General of the World Health Organization was in the airport. He was close to the departure line when it was hit. What will the impact of the WHO being involved in this, what will this mean?
I would consider this a fairly big own goal for Israel in terms of its public relations. Israel's made no secret of its disregard for some of the UN initiatives that are operating in its theatres of war. But now to have the WHO dragged into this, albeit inadvertently, it is really unhelpful. And especially at this time when many people around the world are already questioning Israel's tactics and its seeming disregard for collateral damage. So, yes, it will draw some unwanted negative attention.
What about the response from Iran now? And what about the response from the Houthi movement in Yemen?
Yeah, Iran is, I think, unlikely to respond directly. That's partly because it has itself been greatly weakened. Its air defences have been degraded, and it might not want to risk another relatively ineffective barrage at Israel at this time. But I imagine it could consider some hybrid responses, some kind of operations which are deniable but which everybody knows are Iran. Most likely, however, it will just continue to use the Houthis as a response. And the Houthis, of course, are incentivized in their own way. In fact, the Houthis have already themselves said that they are going to double down and that they will take revenge. And this is just part of the problem for Israel. The downsides to these kinds of operations, these airstrikes against the Houthis, are many, because the Houthis are not just some small rebel group. They've been keeping at bay some of the Middle East's highest defense spenders for the last decade, and they've been on and off at war for pretty much 20 years, since 2004. So for them, war is a way of life. This doesn't worry them, and they're pretty immune to civilian suffering and civilian death. So they are just going to keep going.
The peace talks that we hear about in the region, are they still ongoing, and how will this affect any potential future peace talks?
I think the peace talks in the region are being taken one by one. So the peace talks that everyone's talking about at the moment are, of course, the Hamas-Israel potential agreement, ceasefire, that looks to be on the cards, although it keeps, as usual, being delayed and delayed. And I don't think that these attacks on Yemen are going to scupper those talks. What they could do, however, is put a spanner in the works of the ongoing efforts to end the Yemen war. Because, of course, there has been a civil war going on in Yemen now for almost 10 years. And Saudi Arabia, for example, has been trying to exit that war for the last couple of years. The problem is that the roadmap for talks in Yemen does not include an element at the moment that would have a ceasefire in the Red Sea or on Houthi operations against Israel. And if the goalposts are now changed there, the Houthis are unlikely to go along with it, and that Yemen war could spiral out of control again.
Elisabeth Kendall, an expert on Yemen and the president of the Girton College in Cambridge. We look forward to your expert advice in 2025. Thank you very much for joining me on 5 Live, and happy Christmas to you.
You're welcome.